Yes. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, no matter where you seem to think that you are. Let us all come into this moment now, remembering that the only time that is now. There is nothing else. Let go of all thoughts of the past. Just let them drop. They no longer exist unless you keep bringing them up. And that's only true for you. So you can let them go right here and right now. And also, on the other end, the future hasn't occurred. So why freak yourself out right here and now when you can just be in the now? So let's all come into this moment now, where peace is all that is. And breathe and just be. So we are here, and you are as well. And of course, as always, we'll be talking a lot this afternoon, helping you along with your awakening. This conversation is not to put you back to sleep, but to let you know that you are a mind and not a body, meaning you are powerful, not powerless. You are mindful when you choose to be so, not mindless. Here's a good thing to pay attention to. You do have that choice. You can either choose to be mindful, which is aware of yourself as a mind, or choose to believe yourself, or continue to believe yourself, a body who is helpless and a victim of outside circumstances that you cannot control. Not to say that you can control the circumstances around you, but you can control how you show up or how you react or respond to them, you see. The biggest choice we are telling you about right here and now is to choose to listen to your right mind, the mind of peace. That means no matter what you seem to think you are going through or what you're going through, you can still choose peace over conflict. You don't have to keep up the game of conflict. You can stop it right here and now, even though it feels so difficult, even though it feels virtually impossible. It is not impossible. The only impossibility is the tiny mad idea. The thought that you could ever be apart from God. The tiny mad idea that you believe that you could actually be separate from that which created you and that you are one with. How is that possible? It's not. Only in illusions can you think that to be true. But that's only an illusion, and you can choose right here and now to begin to let those thoughts go. Those thoughts will come up, and they will be feelings and your interpretations, projections, and opinions, and so on. Those are all yours. They are not part of the one mind. The one mind of God is peace always, no matter what, because in truth, nothing else exists. And when we say nothing else exists, we are talking about in the eternal mind that is God. There is nothing but that which is eternity, which is always love, which is always forgiveness and always peace, and in fact joy. So you can do this. It's a choice that you have moment by moment. Each interaction that you have throughout your life is an opportunity to choose between two. And we're going to tell you it is only between but two. And that would be between either listening and identifying as your right mind, which is the mind of peace, the mind of forgiveness, the mind of acceptance, or the mind of conflict, which is your lower mind, your ego mind, the mind of fear. They seem to be a multitude of different voices, but they are not. You see, the only one that is or seems to be a multitude of different voices would be the mind of fear, which seeks to split itself off more and more and more to become so fragmented you have the feeling of being out of control. What you want to do is give up that control to your right mind, which will put everything back into order. And that does take practice, and it takes a consistent practice. It doesn't take I will choose to be okay right here. I'll say the sentence that all is well, and then go on with my day and get frustrated and irritated and upset and out of alignment. It's a moment-by-moment awareness of your intention to be in your right mind, so that you can notice when you choose not to be in your right mind, you see. You can say to yourself, today I choose to be in my right mind. And it's not just, I choose to be in my right mind. That's the only thing I'll say. That's the only time I'll be aware of my mind. And just go on because I said the sentence, you see. It's really, I'm going to say this and mean it. Meaning I'm going to be aware as much as I possibly can, and I'll know when I lose awareness. And then rather than castrating myself or berating myself, I will choose forgiveness, because that's the right thing to do. In fact, that's the only right thing to do, is to forgive the mind, your mind, all minds, as all minds are one. So, anyway, we are here, and we look forward to having conversations with all of you today. So we are ready.
The first question is from Anna. And Anna asks, Dear Jesus, sending you my gratitude for this life has changed. Thanks to you, I am home. Many masters teach that we are not the mind, that we are beyond the mind and thoughts. You speak to us as if we are the mind. Are you talking about the ego mind, or are you saying we are a mind, but without the ego mind? Or that what we truly are is beyond the mind?
So, first of all, you are a mind, because that is all that is mind. Mind is everything, you see. But the thing is, there is the idea that mind can be a whole bunch of different things. And when we speak to you about being a mind, we're not talking about you're an ego mind. No, that's one part of your mind. Here in duality, the mind is split. And that is between two, like we were saying, that's between your wrong mind and your right mind. Your right mind is where the Holy Spirit abides, or your higher self is. Your self that is one with God and has never left God, you see. Then there is the other side, which is confusion, which is the ego mind, which has told you lots and lots of stories, a lot of which you believe. If you didn't believe them, you wouldn't have any questions. So, but yes, we speak of you as a mind to differentiate yourself from form and content, you see. Mind is content. Body is form. Mind is the perceiving mechanism, or the deciding mechanism that you have within you. That is the part of you that can choose between one or the other. That would mean in this state of duality that is the dream, you always have the choice between listening to the teacher of awakening or the teacher of sleepiness. Obviously, the ego is the teacher of sleepiness, and the Holy Spirit is the teacher of awakening. And here in duality, because you believe in duality, because you believe to some extent you are a body, you need these kinds of teachings to tell you you are not a body. As a body, you are helpless. You have no help. That's what the body says. But itself, you see, and itself is small, itself is, we're going to tell you, insignificant, because it is ephemeral. Mind is eternal. Mind is everything. We say mind because that is what you are, really. And it's hard to say it like this because in truth, in the real truth, you're not even any of that or any of this. This is language, you see. And so what it is in so many different spiritualities which speak about the same thing, use a different dialect. you see, or a different dialogue even, that says you could be mind, or you could be heart, you could be this, or you could be that. And we were saying to the channel, what happens is, getting caught up in terminology, you completely block yourself from the awareness of the truth of your beingness, which is not only outside, but beyond the idea of language. Words. Words are limitations, really. You use them here in the dream because that's how you learn to communicate with one another in the dream, in form. But in your true beingness, you do not need words at all. Here, mind is used, or can be used and seen as, oftentimes misunderstood as brain, or as intellect, which comes from brain, which is seeing yourself as form, or seeing mind as form, but then heart, which is a symbol of love, which also has to do with something within a body. You have an organ that is the heart. You have an organ that is the brain. Both of those are symbols, really. Neither of them are real or true. They are not you, you see. Then you get into semantics. One of the most deadly things, one of the most deathly tactics of the ego, especially when the ego says, yes, I'll do this, I'll become the spiritual ego. The one that seems higher would probably be a different word than mind, you see. And when so many speak of things in so many different ways, it can become confusing, but tune into yourself, use whichever term you want, you see. If heart feels better to you, use heart. If mind feels stronger to you, then use mind. Either one, it doesn't matter. So, at any rate, does that make sense?
Okay, Anna asks, do we have to go beyond the mind?
What you want to do is move beyond the concept of yourself as being separate. Does that make sense? Meaning seeing yourself as a separate identity apart from everyone else, which is not truth. You are actually one with all minds, you see. And that's what you need to get beyond, is your own identity that you made up. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Wonderful.
It does. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And thank you.
The next question is from Kurt. And Kurt asks, would you give me some affirmations that will help me focus my tight mind?
Well, what you want to do, we'll give you some things to say, but what you want to do is you want to focus in your right mind, so that, see, the right mind, your right mind is always focused in one direction. That direction is awakening, which is love, which is always peace, which is always forgiveness. So what you really want to do is affirm to yourself and remind yourself, I am not a victim. I am free, I am spirit, and I am love. And then you say to yourself, which mind is love? And you know right off the bat, the only mind that is love, that the love that we speak of, the unconditional eternal love, is in your right mind. Wrong mind doesn't know anything about it. Makes up lots of different stories and different kinds of love, but those are not eternal and those are not real love. The love we're speaking of is real love, and that is always in your right mind. So if you feel that you are not loving, or your thoughts are not loving, you can know right away that you are listening to your wrong mind. So the thing to do in that circumstance is, I must have decided wrongly. I must have chosen to be afraid of love today. And so, knowing that, I will change my mind and begin to release all thoughts that align with fear and turn instead to thoughts of love, which are forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So it's always going to be less about affirmations and more about paying attention to what mind you have chosen, which would be how you feel, and that would be also your interpretations. If you find yourself judging, you know you're in your wrong mind, you see, and you want to step back at that moment and say, again, I've chosen my wrong mind, I've chosen to separate. I want to now turn that over to the Holy Spirit, choose my right mind, and come back into sanity, which is oneness, and follow the feelings that take you there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question is from Peg. And Peg asks, this is both a spiritual and a life issue. 3 years ago, we were given legal guardianship of our teenage grandson due to the abuse he was experiencing by his stepfather. My relationship with my grandson has been on a deep soul level even before his birth. My grandson spent much of his childhood with me until my daughter married and moved to a distant state, causing us to be about 80% alienated. For about 2 years now, my daughter has stopped communicating with my grandson and myself. I have asked my guides, angels, and Holy Spirit for assistance, but I'm not hearing or feeling their guidance. I've also attempted to communicate soul to soul. I'm feeling lost and ineffective to help either myself or my grandson. I have 4 questions related to this. The first is, what am I doing incorrectly to not hear the guidance that I know is being given?
Okay. Well, first of all, we will say to you that the one thing that you really can do is be a demonstration of love. So whenever there's a call for love, you show up as love, which means forgiving and accepting of all. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
And so are you still in communication with your grandson?
Oh, he lives with me. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what you want to do is choose to be a present state of peace under all circumstances. Does that make sense?
With my grandson, absolutely.
Wonderful. But you've got to take it to all areas of life, you see. So then you become a complete demonstration of peace and of love.
I think I'm pretty good at that, actually.
Very good. Then you're doing a good job.
Except my daughter is not speaking to him or me, right?
It's not something that you can do anything about, see. And so that's why we are encouraging you to maintain that state of mind of peace. Things just are the way they are, and some things you can't do anything about. Say you can't make somebody talk to you or your grandson, but you can be the love that you are instead. We know that that might feel very difficult, you see.
It hurts. It hurts. It's very
Yes.
painful. Yeah. And it's really hard for my grandson. You know, in particular, even more
Absolutely.
probably than me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So then I should just discontinue trying to communicate with her or whatever.
If it feels right to you to keep trying to communicate with her, but what you want to do is not take an offensive stance or a defensive stance or anything, whether or not she communicates with you, you see. So that you're at peace with whatever happens, either she communicates with you or not. Either way, you can still be a demonstration of love, you see, and forgiveness.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome. And the other thing we'll point out is, as you know that this is a dream, everyone has come in with scripts, and you do not know what anyone else's script is, and most of the time you may not even know your own. But each of these situations where you find yourself in these high or negative kind of experience feelings, you can know this is a classroom. what you wouldn't do is ask the Holy Spirit to be your guide in this classroom, okay? And this is just part of learning of some sort that you wanted to go through, and that even your grandson and your daughter and everyone chose to go through, you see.
So am I hearing you correctly? Not to talk to, or not to invite Holy Spirit?
Not at all. We didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We said this is a classroom for you. Give it to the Holy Spirit to guide you.
Even if I can't hear the Holy Spirit or
Exactly,
feel
because
the
you
guidance.
may not hear the Holy Spirit, but you can tune into yourself and know if you're feeling conflict, you're not hearing the Holy Spirit, you're listening to your wrong mind. So then you become more centered and say, okay, I know that those feelings of negativity, of despair in any way is not coming from the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, please help me to see this differently, you see.
Right.
And say, I do not know what this is for. Please show me. And if anything comes up to show you all these terrible things and wrong-minded things, then you're not listening to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit will say, this is a call for love. This is a call for forgiveness. This is a call to choose peace over conflict, no matter what someone else might be thinking.
Because that's their journey.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And be gentle on yourself, too, throughout all of this. And of course, be gentle with everyone. So just be loving and kind.
I'm pretty good at that. Thank you.
Okay, there's another question here from Peg. She asked, what more can I do to help my grandson, now a senior in high school, work through his trauma?
Well, like we were saying, you have to demonstrate rather than teach in words all the time, you see. So you see how he is feeling and help him learn about choosing to listen to his right mind over his wrong mind, you see. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes sense to me. It does not make sense to him.
Right.
But, right. So what I try to do is to be the example of peace, of love. I'm not 100% always fabulous at that, but for the most part, that's how I am in the world, in the home, in his life. I think I don't know anything else to do but that.
And then there's nothing else to do. See, sometimes there is nothing else to do, and he will come around as he comes around, you see. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then the last question is my soul learning what it needs to from this?
Yes, it is. It is learning to choose peace over conflict. Like you were saying, you do tend to choose to be a demonstration of such in your life, and that is what you are to learn. So yes, indeed.
Excellent. Another blessing to be on planet Earth. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate your love. Thank you.
We appreciate you.
So the next question is from Carmela Maria, and Carmela Maria asks, Beloved Jesus, I'm on the spiritual path with the Father. I feel the love when I meditate, and anytime my mind remembers his name, Father. But from the time my path started, I forgot about Jesus, because the Catholic Church introduced a Jesus that I only remembered on the cross. My heart was in sorrow for all the storytelling of the crucifixion, and that he was crucified because of my sin. For about 6 months, I've come to meet Master Jesus on YouTube through Aaron Michelle. I have so much love for this loving Jesus. Now, I remember the sign of the cross in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But I've never understood who is the Holy Spirit. Can you introduce it to me so that my understanding of the Trinity is complete? Thank you.
Absolutely. So first of all, we will explain the Holy Spirit is the memory of God in your mind, which is the memory of love in your mind. And then secondly, we're going to tell you this. We want you to realize there is actually no Trinity. There is only oneness. You see, throughout time, humankind has believed it needed intercessors, and it needed to have a process in which to come to God, which involved a lot of outer involvement rather than inner connection. Now is the time of awakening, where you come to realize you've never left the mind of God, you've always been one with God, and you still remain one with God. Therefore, why and how can you be one with God and not be able to speak to Father, you see? Or however anyone wants to call it. Father, Mother, God, it, her, him, whatever you want. Whatever feels right to you, you see, because it has no name in truth. The name comes from the human mind, the ego mind, which needed to give names in order to make it real to it, you see. Really, God has no name. God is spirit, and beyond that, even just formless love, you see, just eternal, and eternity itself, always with you and always available, because you are one with it, and it is one with you, and you've never left it, and it will never leave you, you see. The only feeling, or the feeling that you have left God, is the only illusion that you really need to look at so that you can let that go, you see. In all the myriad of ways that it might show up in your life to be that supposed force that says you separated from God or that you could. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Wonderful. So, the best thing for you to do now to develop this relationship is to realize you are one with all that is. Holy Spirit is in you and with you, and is a demonstration of love in you, forgiveness in you, and also the memory of God in you. So, it is not a separate entity from you, but one with you. It is also higher than you, so to speak, even though in true reality there is no higher and lower, and there is no hierarchy, you see. But it is that way so that you know that the mind that you've chosen that feels that it is separate is not your right mind, you see. So Holy Spirit is in your right mind, the mind that knows itself as one with God and one with forgiveness. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
The next question is from Jenny Marie, and Jenny Marie asks, I recognize that a lot of my perceived suffering is because I have strong attachments to certain family members, pets, and situations. Can you please provide some advice on how to detach from, quote, things, unquote, in the illusion? I'm sure it's very simple, but my ego appears to be struggling with letting go. Thank you so much.
So, first of all, yes, it's very simple, and of course your ego is having trouble letting it go because your ego is never going to let it go. You have to step into the decision-making part of your mind and say, I am choosing to let these things go. I am choosing to release myself from these attachments, because these attachments really are meaningless in truth, you see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like when I think of my pet, for example, I think, oh, I just love them to bits, so I'm really attached to them, but that's not real love then, is it? Is that a special love?
It's special love, but it's also love. It's also
Yeah.
love. It's a reflection of love, you see. You care for your pets you love them, well, that can be reflected in the way that you see yourself as well. You see, not that you see yourself as a pet, but you can love yourself the same way, and you can love everyone else as well that same way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's typical that attachments to certain figures in the dream, such as pets or people or other things, seem to occur because that's part of your classroom. What you want to do is hand over your attachments to the Holy Spirit and ask to see them differently. Help me to see these attachments differently. Help me to release them and release this, we'll call it stickiness, that I may have with that, you see. Forgive myself for any specialness I think I may have or do have or have created or made up, and just be present with love, which means without judgment. So that's another thing to look at when you're looking at your relationships is, am I looking at these relationships through the mind of judgment, which is telling me I have attachments to these beings, these things that I'm saying I love so much, and then you judge it, then you're not loving, you see. But if you're just loving for the sake of love and kindness, that's love. It's a demonstration of love, a reflection of love, you see.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is one I'm going to have to keep handing over, I think, because at the minute
Yes, indeed.
It's a struggle, but it's not really. My ego thinks it is, but it's not. So it's a funny time for me at the minute because I'm in this limbo state where I realize everything now isn't real.
Right.
It's not a bad thing. It's great. It's helping knowing that it's not real, but but I'm noticing more then that I have what I perceive to, call attachments, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's something I'm going to have to keep handing over. But it does make sense what you say. It does make sense, the judgment side of it. Yeah.
And then the other part is, again, to lighten up about it. Don't take it seriously. It's like, okay, this is a dream. Everybody has attachments here. I'm not alone in that. And, this is a classroom and all that. So all of my life experiences can be used as a way to wake me up if I hand it over to the Holy Spirit to guide, you see. And so instead of judging your attachments, say, okay, well, I love my pets and I love my family, and I know, at least on the intellectual level, that this is a dream and these are figures in the dream and all of that, and they're not really real, as in the figures aren't really real, but spirit is, the love in them is, and that's what you're really connecting with, you see. And it's good to cultivate those kinds of love. It's just, obviously, you also want to let it go at the same time, because all physicality ends, you see. Spirit does not, but physicality does. So.
Yeah.
But again, lighten up about it. Don't make it a serious thing. It's just part of the dream.
Okay. And I find myself thinking this dream illusion is clever because it's got me convinced, but that's my ego thinking it's clever, isn't it?
Yes, it is, of course. Ego always thinks it's clever. Very
But
clever.
the Holy Spirit doesn't think it's clever. He doesn't even make it real.
Exactly. The Holy Spirit says it's nothing, you see.
Yeah.
We will say that as far as a thought goes, it's pretty clever. It is. But that doesn't give it power, you see.
Yeah.
So, you're pretty clever, but I know better than that.
Okay.
So, and
Thank you.
here's the other thing. The ego is part of your mind, so it's not actually separate from you at all. Like we said, you have two thought systems. It's the wrong mind and the right mind. So your ego thought system, which is the wrong mind, and the Holy Spirit thought system, which is your right mind. And you're always choosing between the two. And what you want to do is identify more and more with your right mind and let the wrong-minded thought system go even more, so that you cease to even think with it, and it will just fade away through practice.
Okay. Am I allowed to ask, when like Jesus was incarnate and when he was like a small child, did you did Jesus ever have the ego come online at all?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Have you heard of the 40 days in the desert?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a lot of releasing.
Yeah.
A lot of
Okay.
looking at and letting go, you see.
Hmm.
A lot of looking at that and saying, this cannot be real.
Mm.
This cannot be real. And
Yeah.
the obvious lightening up about it and really realizing, okay, this cannot be true. How can I, who am eternal, also be ephemeral? That's impossible. This is a dream. None of
Yeah.
this can be so.
Okay. That's interesting. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Indeed. In fact,
I,
here's the thing. Everybody who comes into this, or we'll say seems to come into the dream, more or less has an ego right away because it's already there. It's almost like you made it right away.
mm,
You see, you said, okay, I forgot already. Well, it's so scary out there. I've got to make up something. Well, I'll make this. And then the ego was born, so to speak.
yeah.
We'll say it seemed to be born because it actually was never, it never was. And then throughout your life, you identified so much with the ego because you really believed that, okay, in order to survive, I have to be this, you see.
Yeah.
And the this that we're talking about is actually a limitation, is the limited mind, the mind of fear.
Yeah.
But then now, you see, you are waking up and say, okay, well, I've learned the truth. I am not ephemeral. In fact, I'm not a body. The body is ephemeral. Bodies die. I'm not a body. I am eternal because I am spirit. I've never left the mind of God. This is a dream. And the only feeling of separation that I have, that is an illusion that I can let go of. And depending on where you are along the journey, it will be easier or harder. But just keep going with letting it go, you see.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll let that absorb.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. So no, nobody comes in here without somehow also bringing along a false thought. In fact, you came into the world so that you can release your false thoughts, you see. You said, I'll go there and I'll wake up in the dream and I'll say, you know what, this cannot be so. I'll probably fall asleep for a little bit, but I know this time is the time of awakening. And more around me will also be waking up, so we will walk with each other. I'm going to do that. So,
Wonderful. Thank you.
you're welcome, and thank you.
Next question is from Iris. And Iris asks, my husband and I just recently had to go to a big city. And while we were walking, we saw lots of homeless people. I could not help but feel sorry and worry and wondered how could I come into peace with that. I remember the quote, look upon it all and make peace with what is. Is the suffering I perceived my own projection or interpretation? I feel I know their suffering is real, but since I am too the dreamer in the dream of the 3D world, how can I tell anything for sure? Thank you so much for helping me to understand.
Okay, so first of all, this will make it easier for you to see that nothing here is true or real. There are reflections of truth here, but none of it is actual truth. And the better thing to do, we understand, yes, compassion, but see yourself not separate, but you are one, each of you in different expressions, so to speak, but still one in mind, in truth, though you have forgotten. So yes, indeed, it is a projection. Although they may seem to be suffering, they might even think that they're suffering, but some of them don't think that they're suffering at all. Some of them think this is freedom. I want to live like this, you see. Others want to feel better and get better, and so they are on their journey to feel better and get better. Then there are the ones, like we were saying, who want to continue the way they're going, and so they will. And that's because they are minds as you are as well, you see. So you never want to look on anyone and say, I feel sorry for you. I feel so bad for your circumstances. Because what that does is say, you're a body and you are victim. Which also says to yourself, I too am a body and I too am victim. You want to wake up and say, I am a mind and you are a mind as well. Because we are one in mind. You might have a different life path, so to speak. You might have different ideas than I do, but I'll let you have your ideas. I'll help where I can help, and I'll let go where I can let go, which you do want to let go no matter what. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
So the higher road would, rather than feeling sorry for someone and looking at people, homeless people, and saying, you know, you really have it rough and I feel so terrible for you and you must be suffering, do realize, and that's a good thing that you pointed that out to yourself, I'm projecting my own interpretation of their situation on them, you see. So what I think they might be feeling is actually how I am feeling about myself, you see. Does that make sense? In fact, you feel homeless yourself because you feel as though you have been cast out of the mind of God, or that you have destroyed God and so you are cast out. And that's the myth. That is part of the tiny mad idea because that never happened, you see. So the feeling of homelessness is actually something shared by everyone on some level, you see. You might not be physically presenting as a homeless person, but somewhere in your mind you kind of feel a little bit of that homelessness yourself. Does that make sense? It's a wanting to feel whole, W-H-O-L-E, and so you want to begin to let go of those thoughts of not being whole, you see.
Yeah. Is that then where the atonement comes in to close the gap?
Absolutely. That is the atonement, when you accept that I am whole, W-H-O-L-E. I've never left the mind of God. I never did anything. There's nothing to feel guilty about. The guilt is something I made up, you see. Meaning, I made up my ego. My ego told me I'm guilty. I believed my ego. Now is the time to let that go and say, okay, that's just a story, and that's not true. So turn to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit says you never left. You remain W-H-O-L-E, and you have always been home, you see.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does that answer your question?
It does, completely.
Wonderful.
So the next question is from Danny. Danny asks, some say that the ego completely vanishes at a certain point in the process of enlightenment. Others say that here on earth we need it and it does not vanish. Would you be so kind to specify on this?
Yes.
Thanks and
we
lots
will.
of love.
Absolutely. So enlightenment happens every time you choose enlightenment. The ego does not really exist. And so the ego disappears every time you choose to listen to your right mind rather than the ego. If you're not paying attention to the ego and you're not giving the ego any heed, there is no ego.
Okay, but it tries always to get back, to come back.
Right, and that's your mind. So you can choose between listening to the ego, and it will put up a fight, but as long as you don't take it seriously and you say, here's the tiny mad idea, trying to get a foot in again, I don't have to pay attention to it. The less I pay attention to it, the quieter it will become in time. It might get louder for a little bit, but still you'll just say, okay, this thought that keeps wanting to come in is my thought, and I can release this because it is my thought, and I am the mind that thought it. You see, and I have the ability to choose between two thought systems. The ego thought system, the one that you're talking about, the one that keeps trying to come in, or the thought system of peace, which is the Holy Spirit instead, you see.
Okay, so do you have always to struggle with your ego system? You don't? Or
What was that?
do you struggle until
Yes.
today with your ego system?
We did, remember the 40 days in the desert. 40 days.
And after that?
It was gone.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I wanted to know. If it
Yes.
goes one day. So one day it will vanish.
Yes, because it doesn't actually exist at all.
Perfect.
One day
Great.
you'll wake up and say, that's nothing. There's nothing there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question is from Giuseppe, and Giuseppe asks, Jesus, pray tell me what to say or do about my only daughter, who tells me she is suffering from her own insecurities, to the point where she has suicidal thoughts and attempts. Of course, I am very concerned. I have been forwarding Aaron Michelle's message from the master emails to my daughter, and I am aware that she does read and follow them to the best of her abilities. But when she is very low, this becomes quite difficult for her. She has had some relationship upheavals in her past and feels quite negative about herself. I know and see the amazing, kind, generous, loving person she really is, and so does her partner. She does not have a child of her own, but currently works as at a senior school with children in sick bay, and they all love her for her love, kindness, and understanding. She has always given so much to others. Jesus, your advice on this matter is greatly appreciated. I understand that this is all an illusion and see it from a different perspective, but when a child I gave birth to is going through all of this, I want to assist her in healing herself. Much love and gratitude.
So the thing that you can do is just to continue to be there as a demonstration of love, the love that you want to show her every time, so that no matter what she comes to you with, you are that love, you see. Not judgment. You don't say anything but to love, you see. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. So just choose to love your daughter, no matter how she seems to be, because the best thing for you to do is just be that expression of love, you see. You want her to see the love in her and then extend it out, you see. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
The next question is from Kurt. And Kurt asks, please explain the atonement principle and how it works.
So the atonement principle is forgiveness, and how it works is you accept it. We know that you want a little more than that, but we just figured we'd just give you that short answer right there. Atonement is forgiveness, and you must accept it, you see. You must say to yourself, whenever you find yourself reprimanding yourself or judging yourself or anyone else, any situation, you stop for a minute and say, I'm not in my right mind. I have now just put up a block to forgiveness. I've put up a block to the atonement. I'm going to then turn my mind over to the atonement instead. and change my mind. You see, I'm not going to continue going about this life with judgmental thoughts to the best of my ability. Every time I find myself in judgment, I will know that I'm holding the atonement away from myself. I want to invite the atonement in, so I will let go of my interpretations and look to the Holy Spirit instead. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. It's a moment-by-moment process.
You're right. I was looking for more, but it's nice to be put back on the track.
Wonderful. It's always choosing forgiveness over blame, always choosing peace over conflict. That's atonement.
Okay, the next question is from Iris. Iris asks, is there karma, or is karma simply an extension of the illusion?
Karma is always illusion. There is no karma in truth. Karma is another thought system. Well, it's not another thought system. It's just part of the thought system of the ego. It says that you have things you have to make up for. God says otherwise, you see. God says, no, accept the atonement, all is well. You've done nothing wrong.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it explains the magnitude of our illusion, of our
Exactly.
entanglement. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're very welcome.
The next question is from Phil. Phil asks, what is the difference between soul and spirit, if any, in A Course in Miracles?
There is no difference between soul and spirit in A Course in Miracles or anywhere. The reason why soul is not used as much in A Course in Miracles is because it is highly controversial, whereas spirit simply is a formlessness, you see. Formless love. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. So really they're interchangeable. You can use spirit, you can use soul. It doesn't matter. It's just that in A Course in Miracles, to avoid any kind of controversy, we chose to refer to everything as spirit related to that. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yes.
Wonderful.
Wait a second.
So the next question is from Grace. Grace asks, can music affect a person negatively? For example, is it harmful to listen to Marilyn Manson? Or is absolutely everything in the dream or on earth benign, and we're just taught what's good and bad by the pre-existing people?
Okay, so as far as music goes, there are frequencies in the illusion, some of which are of a higher resonance than others, okay? And so others will affect you, so to speak, in one way or another, you see. So a high frequency music will lift up your spirit. A lower frequency music can bring your mind down. It doesn't mean that it can actually do anything to you, okay, because you are none of that. But as far as, or as long as you identify with yourself as a body, you will have the experience of things like that affecting you, you see. But you can also let that go. As far as Marilyn Manson goes, it doesn't matter, you see. It's just to pay attention to how you feel, you see. So if you're not judging anything, then you can simply let it go. And in fact, you can just let it go. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I read his book. He wrote a book many years ago, and I read it, and my heart was kind of like, oh my gosh, he nobody comes here and has like an awesome experience, and then all awesome. So I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah. So just to know that I can let it go, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it could affect me if I believe it. right?
Right.
Okay.
You don't have to let it affect you, you see.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Jesus. I love you.
You're welcome. We love you too.
Okay, the next question is from Kurt. Kurt asks, do all events in time occur simultaneously outside of time? Please explain.
Yes. Because yes, there is no time. That's the answer. It's one of those quantum things. So there are no words. It's just quantum, you see. There is no time. That's the only answer.
Why does there seem to be time on this level? What is it?
Because, we'll tell you, time was made up by you to keep you convinced that this place and time is actually real, you see. There are consequences for time and all of that, but that's only on the level of form. That's only in the tiny mad idea, you see. It's like a game, and it is illusion. You made it up to convince yourself that this could be real. Why you did it? It was because you wanted it to be real. You wanted it to feel completely real. You wanted it to feel so intense. You wanted to feel like you could make something other than what you are. And it can be kind of hard to come to terms with that, but remember that's what forgiveness is for, and you can laugh at it because it is a tiny mad idea. It's complete silliness, although it may not feel it right now.
It's a lot to swallow.
Yes, it is. Metaphysics can often be. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome, and thank you.
All right, the last question is from Phil. And Phil asks, if this world is an illusion, does it really matter what anybody does in the world?
It doesn't really matter, but what kind of experience do you want to have, you see? It's up to you what you want to experience. So if you want to experience a life of turmoil, you can choose everything that goes along with that. But it doesn't really matter because who you really are is completely untouched by any of this, you see. But what we are saying to you is, why not choose to feel better? Why not choose forgiveness? Does that make sense?
It does, but you're also saying that ultimately it doesn't matter.
Right, it doesn't matter. But that's the point too. Do you really like the tiny mad idea of separation?
I don't. No.
So you're here to remedy that, so to speak, or actually atone, which would be to accept the atonement. Not to suffer, but to choose to be free. To choose to be love. To choose to be in your right mind. To choose the truth of who you really are, which is eternal, you see. And that is eternal love. You see, you came here to close the gap. And remember, there is no real gap actually. That's the illusion. There's an illusion that there's a gap, there's an illusion that there's a separation, but none of it is true or real. It's just a dream. And you wanted to come here and say, well, I'll fall asleep, and then I'll begin to wake up, and I'll wake up and I'll say, I don't have to live like this. This is not me. I am not a body. I am an eternal being. I am completely unlimited. That means limitless. Rather than think of myself as a puny, insignificant form, body, completely victim of a world that does not exist, you see. He said, I'll look at that and I'll laugh and say that's ridiculous. I am the mind that dreams. Therefore, I can choose differently, and I choose to think in alignment with my Creator, who is love. and who continues to extend love because that's all my Creator is, which means that's all I am because I am one with my Creator. I never left my Creator, and my Creator has never left me because that is the only impossibility, you see. You are always one with who you really are in truth. You just forget from time to time, but then you remember there is no time. So, does that answer your question?
You summed up your whole philosophy in that statement. Very good.
Wonderful. That's the answer. So,
thank you. Of course.
Thank you. So we appreciate you all. Looks like the session has come to the close of time that doesn't exist. It's completely illusory. There is no time. We love you. We appreciate you all. Wake up. You are powerful beings. You are minds. You are heart. You are love. You are formless. You are light. You are eternal. And we love you. Namaste.
Namaste.